Hello and welcome to another episode of God-Sized Stories. I'm very blessed I have Tyler back again. Tyler, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Tyler Eggy. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor and I work for Hopeful Therapy. I was actually on this podcast almost 3.5 years ago. A lot has changed since then. I became a fully licensed clinician in Illinois. I started working for an amazing practice called Hopeful Therapy. And yeah, God's just been doing some awesome things in between that gap.
Yeah, I've been very blessed to be your friend in many different ways, Tyler, over the many years we've known each other now, well over a decade. As you referenced, you were on episode 27. So this is like 100 something. It's in the teens now. So it's like almost 100 episodes later. But also, as you said, it's like 3.5, almost 4 years. Because
Time flies.
that was May 2020, which I don't want to think out because it was a blessing though to talk with you then, because you were one of the first like two or three that I did during COVID when it was like video. It was like one of the first
Mm.
video ones I did because I wasn't meeting with people because we're in that COVID world where nobody left their homes and was a mental nightmare for extroverts like me.
Such a strange time.
It seems like it at times almost seems like it didn't happen now to me because I blocked it off. So,
Right?
but we've had this hilarious path. You and I were joking about this earlier where it's like, so when we went to college is when I met you, and it was me moving pretty much to your hometown. And then post college, you graduate and then move to my hometown, which is like an hour and a half from where we were at college. And now a couple of years after that, we both independently move an hour and a half away from those locations to a new location and live 5-10 minutes away from each other, which is like wild. It's like one of those things that only God can orchestrate. So it's like last time it was in video, not just because of COVID, but because we had distance between us. Now there's like no distance between us, which is
Right?
such a joyful thing that
And we're both married men now.
I had the joy of being at that wonderful day. It was a gorgeous wedding. So many wonderful people there. Great food because the wedding. Why not? But we're going to talk today. You've had a lot of life experiences, and now you have another unique experience with work as well that a lot of us don't have. And we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of healthy versus unhealthy faith, because there's a lot of churches out there. There's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of hurt people out there that experience life differently. So I'm going to let you start talking about that a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'll start with this. So, you mentioned the pandemic and just kind of what a weird thing that was. Well, in a lot of ways, it's really shown the ugly side of faith. And to preface, I'm not really here to talk about the pandemic and faith, more just kind of giving a general summary of some of the shifts I noticed
Mhm.
over the last few years, just like, for example, the extreme political divide, churches just really kind of either adding or taking away from the original message of the gospel. And I've really seen different kind of camps of thinking now with how it's created kind of that division of, what does it even mean to have a healthy faith anymore versus an unhealthy faith? And that's been a helpful framework to kind of help me to conceptualize of a really common struggle that our society is facing and people are feeling.
So I'm sure, like, because we both share experiences doing things. Like now we're both independently doing youth groups at different churches too. These weird parallel things. What are some other examples you've seen? Because I've obviously seen some, but you have these other unique perspectives of really healthy faith. Now, what are some things that you're seeing that are really healthy in churches?
Well, I think that a lot of different areas to encompass that, but one of the big primary ones, especially as a counselor, is integrating your faith and your emotional world. So I thought that that would be a interesting place to start of
Mhm.
just kind of explaining how, like, for example, It's like one of the most common things that's brought up in a counseling session where like the church in general sometimes will have an unhealthy relationship with emotions in themselves. But something I'll often tell clients is that emotions are totally normal. And in fact, we see healthy, deep expressions of emotions in culture. The book of Psalms is filled with them, and so is the book of Job. But a lot of people kind of get into this, like, my faith is superior to my emotion kind of deal,
Mm.
where it's almost like they try to not feel their emotions or skip over the reality of emotions. And let's face it, life's hard sometimes. It's really hard. So I think integrating just how the two are actually pathways to God, and something I'll explain to people is the difference between, are your emotions leading you or are they leading you to Christ?
Mm. Yeah, that was a big thing for me. And it's like, I would have thing that I've seen churches doing really well, even before COVID, I feel like is even more so after COVID, is counseling. Churches encouraging counseling. Like I've met so many pastors that themselves are in counseling, but then are encouraging their churches to be in counseling. Because I feel like that was a stigma a decade ago. It's like, why would you talk to a counselor? She said,
Yep.
just pray your stress away.
Right. Which I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because that's another aspect I wanted to bring up, or that's actually what's called spiritualizing. And it's
Mm,
something we do with not just emotions, but that's a big trait of an unhealthy believer where it sounds a lot like Jesus. It
mm,
sounds kind of good on paper, but you can kind of feel something's off about it and unrealistic. And then it kind of fosters this, oh, I didn't have enough faith, so I need to try harder to have more
yeah,
faith. And it's like, but it's not about us. So one of the aspects of a healthy faith I like to teach people is learning to meet yourself and others exactly where they're at. Like
mm,
sometimes you're going to be in just a bad season of life. You're going to feel disconnected from God. That's okay. That doesn't mean that your faith is weak, that you need to believe harder, but that's a common trap that almost like this, I got to manufacture more faith, which even is kind of a message from the world, almost like a business, like, oh, we just got to increase our numbers, increase productivity. And that's actually another one, in addition to the spiritualizing, is I have to do more for God.
mm. Yeah, because I've run into so much of that stuff, and it plagued me in like a handful of years. Oh, I can't remember when it was. I was encouraged to seek out counseling, and it was a thing that, especially growing up, that would have been no, 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 no. There's people that need it. I don't need it, and now I'm in the season. It's like there are people that I'm even changing again. Everybody needs it.
I'd
Like
say everybody should do
like
it at some point.
my argument has been for years. Everyone could benefit from counseling.
We all carry brokenness just
Exactly.
because of a variety of reasons, because we live in a broken world, a broken society,
Mhm.
broken families, and we internalize wounds and messages from those
Mhm.
experiences.
And the biggest thing, I guess I can't say the biggest thing because I got a lot of big things from that time in counseling. But one of the biggest things where we started, and it was kind of like what you were saying a few minutes ago about emotions. Because the first thing the guy asked me after going through like my family history type stuff was, has anybody ever taught you how to experience or read your emotions? And I said, what?
Mm.
I'm like, what does that even mean? He's like, exactly. And so like we spent just weeks talking about that is like, what does being angry really mean? What are you experiencing here? What are these feelings actually being? And then looking scripturally to is like, what is your body trying, or what is your heart, your mind, and your soul trying to say when you're angry? Is it something that you're actually angry about? Is this a God angry thing? Or are you being selfish in this
Mm.
moment? Or like, why are you sad? Are you sad because of loss? Are you sad because you're hurt? Are you sad for all these sorts of different reasons? And actually finding out what these emotions really mean instead
Mhm.
of, as you said before, like, instead of just spiritualizing it and being like, well, you're sad because you're not trusting God enough. Well, sometimes it's more that for some people that might be true. I would say less of the case. There's probably a deeper rooted thing that you might not know about. Or maybe in some situations, there's something you just need help with that you don't realize that you need help with because it's buried deep and you need that person to help walk you through it. And instead of just being like, well, you should just pray more, I would argue, yes, that is a half truth statement. You probably should pray more, but maybe not just pray. I wish I was happy. That's not really a healthy prayer, I would imagine. Like, I would more say, Lord, help me discover what is holding me back, what is making me feel this way. Help me discover what you have for me to bring joy out.
Right. Yeah, and I kinda grew up when I was a child, I had sort of this childhood version of faith
Mm.
versus more like an adult version, and I feel like part of that childhood version was you're gonna have life figured out. You're gonna always feel close to God. You're gonna be
Uh,
on fire, quotations, for God, which our society tends to kinda over glorify. But when I look at people around me, I don't really see people that much who are quote unquote on fire for God. And even when they appear to be, it starts to lead into kind of this weird gray area where it's almost like a dismissal of reality. And I think one of the biggest aspects of a healthy faith I've learned is that a healthy faith aligns with what reality actually is versus these unrealistic expectations. And it doesn't mean that God can't exceed our expectations, but I'm just talking about what reality actually is and how that integrates into how do we authentically walk with Christ. And in part of my journey, it's really taken me a long time to kind of see that difference between somebody who's on fire, has a lot of like showmanship for the Lord, says a lot of good things, which you see a lot in the church of these really great pastors who deliver a killer message and have no character.
like, I'll use the example when we were in college, the big thing, there was a very big name that was a lot of the stuff that we used in college ministry together. That guy had a falling out
Yep,
from
I
grace.
remember who you're talking.
And it just like, at first, we were all like, no, no way. That's because we were like, so, like, we were probably more behind his banner than God's banner at that moment.
Mm,
And that I think is a really unhealthy thing because we want to rally behind these leaders instead of the ultimate leader,
yeah,
God. So we've both seen a lot of people in our lives, as you said, have seasons as well beyond fire, but also seen seasons of people leaving faith. Like that's a common thing, sadly, in our life. What are some things that you've seen that have led some people to that?
honestly, one of the number one reasons that I'll see people walking away from faith is because they were in a church environment or around people who had an incredibly unhealthy faith.
Hey,
I've seen a lot of believers walk away because they haven't really tasted and seen who Jesus really is versus the perception of who they think he is. And give you a couple examples. Some people will do things that are incredibly unchristlike in the church, but in subtle ways, like, oh, you've got to just work harder. We're going to take advantage of you because you're a people pleaser. We're going to work you to the ground because that's what you would do for the Lord, which is not true, because there's a time to rest, a
Mhm.
time to work, a time for all things. But another one, 'cause I can't tell you how many people have told me stories of out there responses that are completely unchristlike.
Hey,
And just like people who, they say a lot of the right Jesus-y things, but you kind of don't really feel like something's right here. You feel like something's phony. You feel like something's fake. These are the kind of people where you almost actually feel like you're being silently judged rather than them meeting you where they're at. Being humble is an incredibly important part of a healthy faith that, pride is a huge reason why people leave the church. A lot of people have been hurt by somebody else's unresolved pride.
Mhm.
And, those are the kind of believers that try harder, that, are holier than thou. That, to be honest, I wouldn't want to follow that version of God. I could totally understand why those kind of people would walk away from the faith. I would level with them and go, yeah, I don't like your God because
Yep.
that's not God, that's not who God actually is. But I think a lot of people integrate people who have hurt them into their view of who they perceive God to be.
Mhm.
And if, we don't have a healthy faith or healthy expectations of what a healthy faith looks like, yeah, it tempts us to want to walk away because it just doesn't align with reality. It doesn't align with the expectations of life. Life's hard sometimes. It's normal to have ups and downs. And to be honest, it just really makes me sad just how many people walk with the title of being a Christian who sometimes are less Christian than somebody who doesn't even profess to be a believer, who
Mhm.
acts more Christ-like.
We've talked about this in the past. You and I have this phrase that I love that's like more Jesus, less religion. Like maybe they were hurt by too much religion. Like I know, like especially a lot of friends that were hurt within like a Catholic church setting because it became so much religion and rules and like Jesus
Right.
even talked about. And I said it doesn't have to be Catholic because I know I've been part of Baptist churches that's been a part of. I've been part of non-denominationals where it's like they care more about these rules and and Jesus sadly doesn't get talked about sometimes.
And that's, what I kind of referred to as legalism of like the people who are hyper fixated on outwardly behavior, rules. It's actually the same core struggle as the Pharisees, where they were completely focused on appearance and titles and the hierarchy and power. And, they didn't want Christ even when he was there. And I think about how history just repeats itself, only obviously there's no more Pharisees, so to speak, but there are still plenty of Pharisees in the church. And a lot of the times they're hidden. They're wolves in sheep's clothing. They, outwardly appear to be followers. They're doing the right things, but then, it kind of comes out sideways in conversations where you feel that
Mhm.
harsh criticism of, God forbid you have a drink of alcohol.
Right.
Those kind of people, or God forbid you swear once, then you just lost all your spiritual credibility to those people. And it's like, well, those kind of people are just so fostered with pride. They make church about them.
Mm.
And it's just, really sad.
So tell me a little bit more, as I said, like as I referenced, and you love the idea of like more Jesus, less religion. Where do you get some of those thoughts from?
Well, it's funny you say that because that's actually the name of my favorite book,
Uh-huh.
More Jesus, Less Religion. And it's an amazing book. Every single believer should read that book because that book is actually the sequel to a book called Toxic Faith.
Hmm.
And so this one focuses more on the healthy aspects of faith. And some of the things I remember from reading the book, it did hit on the emotions aspect. It's talked about not feeling like you have anything to prove, like you don't have to prove your self worth to God. And one of my favorites in the book is it talked about the importance of connecting versus correcting people. And that's actually one of the most things that comes up as a counselor where people who they're well intentioned, they want to help, but they throw advice at you right away. And oftentimes unsolicited advice and kind of bad advice. And that advice might work for them. But what people don't talk about is advice creates a power dynamic. It kind of
Mhm.
sends a message of, well, I don't really trust in your ability to solve the problem. So let me fix you. Let me resolve the problem. I'm holier than you. So you just got to listen to me kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Where well timed advice can be different, but the importance of empathizing and connecting with people is so important. And when people feel heard, they feel esteemed. And we see Jesus making people feeling esteemed and, then delivering truth when it's seasoned with love, when it's well timed. He knew his audience. Even Paul says to the Gentile, I am a Gentile, to the Jew, I am a Jew. There's different ways of relating to people. Some people might need a little bit more. That's what I found as a counselor. Some people need a little bit of a wake up call. Some people need a lot more grace and just empathizing. And I believe as believers, we need to be modeling after Christ of what is it that this person's needing from me, and how do I not just, give it advice because I'm uncomfortable and I want to fix,
Right.
and a lot of times it is about our own uncomfortability. And that's why we try to fix. We try to fix somebody who has lost a loved one. We try to fix somebody who's anxious. We try to fix somebody who's doubting their faith, and just, and that is what pushes people away. So that's a really big distinction too of a healthy faith that I wish every single believer knew that, because again, good intentions
Right.
don't always mean good results. And a lot of the times it's not intentional. I do believe people mean well, but it is out of a place of ignorance
Mhm.
where, they just try to resolve or take on that other person's problems. And I don't really believe that that's love. That's not really what that person needs. And I think part of really loving somebody and having a healthy faith is really looking at what is it that this person needs from me in this very moment,
Mhm.
and how can I be a blessing for this person, not to say something that makes me feel better. And I think that one of the most important parts of a healthy faith is that it has to be compelling, because there's something that's not compelling when somebody's living in an unhealthy faith. But we find that Christ, everything he said, everything he did, everything he represented was incredibly compelling, where it made people want to follow him, not feel like they had to measure up, that they had to be good enough, that they had to reach a certain standard, which some people, while they say that they don't believe that, their actions prove otherwise.
Well, Todd, thank you so much for so many things. Thank you for spending this time with me now. Thank you for all the care and love you put into other people, obviously through the ways you serve, and then big time through how you work. It's such a beautiful, also ministry opportunity that brings me joy to see people do. But most of all, thank you for your friendship. We've been friends for 10, 15 years, something like that now. And it makes me happy to just see friendships grow over time,
Mm.
because we're still young men. But to have someone that I call a friend that I've known for like a third of my life
Mhm.
is pretty exciting. Not everybody can say that in this day and age. Like you and I joked what's the joke about Jesus having friends or something?
Oh, one of the miracles that isn't talked about in scripture is that Jesus had 12 friends when he was in his 30s.
Exactly. And the fact that I have someone that I would call that level of a friend is super encouraging to me. So thank you for your friendship.
Of course.
And audience, thank you so much as always for listening. I couldn't do this without you. Goodbye.